and I am a miniatureholic. Now, if you do not know what a miniatureholic is by now, please review my Intro to Miniatures video. Today I have a wonderful surprise. We're at the Museum of Miniature Houses in Carmel, Indiana, and I have one of my favorite ladies here today. Her name is Suzanne Lansoft, and I'm going to have her pronounce her name so I don't butcher it. But I am so elated. I'm so excited because I have loved this museum for years, and now we get to finally hear about how it got started. So, Suzanne, thank you so much for coming. I am such a big fan of yours. Do you have any idea the inspiration you have given me?
Well, I'm happy because you do wonderful work yourself.
Thank you. Oh,
And, you know, the museum really, it evolved, and we had 3 co-founders at the beginning, and we each came to it. I didn't even know one of them until I met her via the second one.
what were their names?
Well, of course, Susie Moffett,
Mm-hmm.
and she's still really president of the board, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And Nancy, my brain is on hold.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, I'll come up with it for you eventually.
Okay. So it was you, Susie, and
Nancy. Nancy Lush.
Nancy Lush.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And she has a big house here too.
Oh, okay. So how did the idea come about? Who thought of the name and locations, and what were your roles?
Well, we the 3 of us met for quite a long time. First of all, just finding a place to put the museum.
Mm-hmm.
We went down to Broad Ripple, all over, and we finally came across this, which had been a PGA headquarters, Midwest headquarters for a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was vacant, and the more we thought about it, we thought it'd work out pretty well, and that's what we went with. And it was sort of nice that it was individual rooms. You could do different things in different
Right.
rooms, and and over the years, cabinets were built and lighting put in, and hopefully better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a challenge for everybody that has dealt with it, and really I think in the last year it's stepped forward with new management,
Mm-hmm.
including Diego.
Mm-hmm.
That just he worked for the Children's Museum before here, and he had a lot of background and knew a lot of things to do, and the displays are better, better mounted, better versatility, and I think that's important in a museum. People don't want to go and see the same stuff for 25 years.
Right.
So this way it gets changed, and I think that's a really important aspect of it.
Now, when did the museum start? When did it open, actually?
We got our, I guess, legal papers and everything about December of 1981, and we opened, I'd say, the doors. I had thought it was late in '92, but I think it was, what did I say, 82,
Mm-hmm.
but I think actually it was probably in mid '93, and and there was a lot to do to get, just even getting some of these things in here, and having some of the stands for them built. You can't come in and put them on a card table.
Right.
And so that all took time.
So what role did you play in each of the other 2 ladies to get this going?
Susie really took care of a lot of the book work, figuring out the financial aspect, how we're going to get enough money to open it and do that kind of thing.
Wow.
We had to decide even how much to charge, and I'm old, so at this point now people come in and they drop $10 like it's nothing. And when we opened, I think adults were $3 and children were $2.
Wow.
And it's just, that's the timing. So it's and nobody ever once have I seen, and I'm not here that often anymore, but you come in and they'll say, how much is it, and they'll pay for 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
They never blink an eye, and I've never had anybody complain on the way out.
It's
so.
well worth it, though. So what did you do to help get this museum to where it is now? What was your role?
Well, we had the collection of 3 people, and knew a lot of other people because there were clubs that, several in the area that were dedicated to miniatures. And so there was really plenty of source of room boxes, small doll houses, that sort of thing. And so each of the three co-founders put in their main house, usually the first thing they did. And then from there, we went to other room boxes, and as time went on, we were given more houses. And right now, we're toying with the idea of an addition, because we really still have a lot of things that don't fit through the door here, and so we need something with a larger
More
entrance.
space, right.
Yeah.
So your role mainly was literally putting this together, all the displays and organizing where things were going to go inside the museum.
Yes.
Okay.
And one other thing, recently Diego joined the staff as really curator. And one thing I love about what he's done, his signage is fabulous. You can read it without glasses. And it really describes what went into putting it together and who did it. And that has just come up tenfold.
Were there any obstacles in your path when trying to get this museum together? Or would that more or less lean towards Susie's area, her trying to find the money?
I remember my husband and son and I painted the interior, because we didn't have much money laying around for this. And Susie and her husband did some of the repair work. He could fix anything, and so there were things like that. And the place, like the parking lot wasn't in great condition. In fact, we still need to redo the back door. But I'm looking forward to them putting an addition on so that we can bring in some of the larger pieces and put some of the offices in here.
Okay. What's your advice for anyone who's just getting into being a miniaturist?
To go slow. And we do the once a year sale, because we have so much stuff donated, and we're into like the second, almost third generation of people really into doing miniatures. And so there's a lot of stuff that comes from grandma that they don't want, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera. And and it's a wonderful way for people that want to start out. They can come to a sale like that. And of course,
The attic sale.
yes, the attic sale is great. There really aren't many shops anymore. There are a lot of those really hit the dust during the pandemic. And but there are the Bishop Show, which was always the biggest show probably in the world. That people come from all over the world to go to it. And it was up in where was that?
It's in Chicago.
Chicago, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was worth going to if you didn't buy a single thing. Difficult, but you learn so much. You saw artisans that you'd never even heard of, and so many of them specialize in one area. Almost all of them do, as a matter of fact. And so that was it was an education in itself.
When the museum had their shows here is when I actually was introduced to this community, and I remember I used to just throughout the year work on my miniatures just to enter it into the contest. And my first time winning, I was so happy, and I remember meeting you there on more than one occasion. But when I first met you there, you were so humble. I didn't know who you were. You were the kindest person. And then as the years went on, I ran into you continuously. And then I remember one day you told me at the convention, at the show actually, you said, and I won the contest, and you said, LaTanya, I normally don't come into the what is that? LaTanya, I normally do not come to the show very often, but now I come just once a year just to see what you're gonna do next. I died laughing. I was you said you really made your mark in the miniature community. I cannot tell you what an ego boost that was.
Oh,
And I
great.
felt like I could do anything after that. For someone like you to notice my work, I was so happy.
I'm glad.
You have no idea the inspiration you are to me.
And I don't give out compliments to just anybody.
It was wonderful. But just so my YouTubers would know that the ladies in this community are so humble. Susie, when my mother passed away in 2016, I just shut down. And I stopped going to the clubs. I stopped really being involved in the community. And she called me out of nowhere, and she said, "Latanya, I know what you're going through." And she just started talking. She told me about her trials and tribulations, and I remember shedding tears on the phone. But that's what pushed me to come back to the community. You and Susie and people like you care so much, and I just really felt like it was important to put this video out just to show what kind of community we have.
Good.
Yeah,
Glad.
I love this community. So now we're going to bring on Diego so he can tell you about his role and the future plans for the museum. Would you please give us some information on your background, a little bit about yourself, and then tell us the future plans for the museum?
Yeah, so I studied anthropology and film in school,
Ooh.
and so mostly I got into these miniatures and the museum through the side of museums itself. Wanting to share with other people all sorts of cool things that exist throughout the world, be that, paleontology, or be that art and art history, or now miniatures.
Yeah.
And getting to fall deeply in love with whatever it is that I'm doing and being able to share those emotions with all of the guests who come through and figure out the best ways to really share all of that information is what I'm really passionate about, is being able to share all of that. And so for the future, a lot of that is trying to figure out the best ways to bring miniatures to the public consciousness again. There's a lot of ways that it's sort of coming back in a way that it hasn't in a while. You can see things like the mini brands, which are really big on TikTok, and opening up those little cases. You see lots of little miniature kits popping up in all sorts of shops. There's a couple that I can name on this street alone that have miniature kits in sort of a new style. And also with online video, filming close-ups of miniatures is a really big thing. And being able to have that really self-contained individual online artist making and sharing that is another really great way that the folks are getting into it, largely through this kind of video content. And so trying to figure out how to access what makes people interested in that and integrate that into what we're doing through the rest of the museum.
Okay.
So, we have lots of Victorian houses, but what are ways that we can show all of the different things that miniatures are right now? Okay. So, for example, recently I've been trying to integrate more things that people might, I'd say, recognize through their day-to-day into the miniatures. I added in some tabletop miniatures, so things like Dungeons and Dragons, the little miniature figures you use to play with that. Yeah. I've added some Legos in, because that's personally how I get into the miniatures. I was a massive Lego kid. And I say the past tense, but I mean the present tense. And so getting to show what are the dollhouse equivalents in Lego, what are the things that make them similar and different, and adding, like I said before, the mini brands. And using those to tie the present moment to these past moments and get people excited about the same things that this museum has been excited about for 30 years. Part of that too is also getting to change out exhibits a bit more quickly. I think I've heard in the past, before my tenure here, it was closer to one exhibit shifting out each year, or maybe twice a year. And I want something new to be in each room at multiple points during the year. Ooh. So that way, when you're coming in, even if it's just small changes, a box here or there, that people are finding new things. We have plenty in our collection that doesn't get to see the light of day very much, either because it needs repairs or because, even though these are miniatures, they sure take up a lot of space.
Yeah, they do.
And so we want to be able to show off as much of the collection as we can. And since we can't do that with space, we need to do that with time. We need to say, over time, we're taking an effort to switch things out. And so the case that's behind you right now is one that we're hoping to switch out approximately every 6 months.
Wow.
And so this whole case, we want it to be thematic. So right now it is ship to shore, something that luckily was organized by some of my predecessors, and I was able to put some of the finishing touches on.
Ooh, you know what would be a great idea?
Yeah.
Harry Potter theme.
Ooh.
Ooh. Miniature Harry Potter. You are so wonderful. And Susie, she just loves you. She talks about you all the time. Tell us about him, Susie. Tell him.
Well, he's done, just the signage is, I go around reading the signs. I've been here for
Wait, they're nice.
35 years or something. And I mean, it tells so much, and it makes you appreciate the whole thing better. And his sense of display is terrific. And you know, he's come up with some better cases and lifts and all kinds of things that, you know, and you know, being this old, it needed a lift. No, I'm talking about the museum.
I was
itself.
gonna say, you're not old, you're wise, you're beautiful. Okay.
I think part of what helps me with writing the labels, and that's again something I've tried to be very intentional about, is making sure that we have not just a label that says what a piece is titled and who donated it, but as much as we can also who made the piece, if there's any individual pieces inside of it that we can point out that particularly make the piece. For something like just out of frame here is the Cotswold Cottage, every single piece in there is an artisan-made piece, and they're all absolutely stellar, and I have a massive list of who made all of those.
Oh, wow.
But figuring out how to display that, you know, it doesn't work to have a scroll next to it. Nobody's going to read a scroll.
No.
And so part of my challenge is figuring out, there's so much great information. How do I package it in a way that people will actually engage with? Or how do I, this is where curation comes in, curate what information there is to be the most relevant, to be the most important. And in that case, that's also where switching things up comes into play. Where maybe I highlight a couple of different pieces from there, and I write a label that says, these were a set of furniture pieces. You can see they all have the same painting on them, made by this artist. And maybe later in the year, I switch that out to highlight some different pieces in there. Maybe I should do that. Maybe that would be a good way to do that.
Yeah, well, what I want to hear about is the addition. The plans for the addition?
Yes, the very preliminary plans for an addition to the museum. Luckily, we have a bit of an empty lot next to us, so we have space to expand. And currently, a lot of our pieces are a little bit scattered through the wind. We have 2 locations, and within those 2 locations, there's several sort of sub-locations that pieces could be. And so part of the challenge of switching out and rotating pieces within the museum is our collections are actually stored off-site. And so part of the expansion is really twofold. One, hoping to get a lot more of that in the same building to make that kind of rotation, to make that kind of display much easier. And 2, to have really both the space and the entryways to fit some of our bigger pieces in.
Yes.
Because we have some large pieces that we physically cannot fit through the door. That's not great for display, but it's better that we aren't trying to dismantle things and shove them in here, and instead are working on the preservation and working on the right ways to show, so that way it's not just something we can say we've done and had checked off, but instead we get to really showcase that we're about the preservation of this in all the senses. Something that's really different about working in a museum than working in really any other job is I'm not just thinking about the next year, I'm not thinking about the next quarter, I'm not even thinking about the next 5 years. In some cases, I'm trying to think about the next 200 years.
All right.
Our oldest piece here is from 1829.
Are you serious?
We have a toy kitchen from 1829.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That is almost 200 years old.
Wow, I did not know that.
And so part of my hope, part of my job as curator and collections manager is also the conservation side of that, making sure that the pieces we have that have lasted for that long get to last for another 200 years.
Wow. So when is this edition going to start?
That's a great question. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of things need to sort of line up to decide that beginning date. We're hoping sometime this year is when we can start it.
Okay.
I'm less involved in that specific process so far.
Give it time.
Yeah.
So I know you worked at the Children's Museum. Their loss, our gain.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've come to an end, but I want to thank you both so much. If people could understand how I feel right now, I'm really trying to stay calm here. I thank you both so much and allowing me to share this with all the miniatureholic YouTubers out there. So, thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. If you want to help us at the museum, you can go to info@museumofminiatures, there's an A in there, .org. That is our email, so you can send us either donation requests, any questions about attendance, or anything of that nature. The website also has all the other ways that you can help us out and to check us out.
I love him. He is such, oh my God.
He's so organized.
Oh. Thank you, and we will see you on our next video. I am in love with that box.
You know, it was so easy. I can't remember where I got the box itself, but I just, you know, it just sort of lent itself to some furniture that I liked, and I liked the chandelier, and you know, it just was really, really
That
simple.
box is my favorite. I love that box. That I don't know how you just you amazing. You are amazing. Let's look at this house right here. I get tickled pink every time I see this little baby.
Yeah.
Where did you get that idea?
Oh, because I'm crazy.
So how did this house come about?
I some out of the clear blue sky decided I wanted a dollhouse, and I had knew nothing. And there was a dollhouse store near the north-south highway east of here. And so I went there, and Tom said, just get whatever you want. So I picked out a house, not knowing, being totally ignorant, that it came in a box, and it was, I didn't know until about 5 years ago, and I got this in 1981, that it had really been designed for a child, so you could take it apart. It had channels for the walls and a lot of other things, so you could take it apart, stick it back under the bed, say for Christmas or whatever you wanted to do. Well, I didn't like that much, and I'm not really into Victorian. I'm really more of an early American person, but it was a Victorian house, so I did what I wanted to, and I made the shutters, and they work.
Those are beautiful.
All but one, and I love the shutter dogs. And inside, there's a more of almost an early American touch with some of the furnishings, because that was more what I had, and that's how we got started on that. But it took me 5 years to finish it. Part of because I didn't know what I was doing, and I was changing the whole scheme and the way the house is put together. I mean, you can't take it apart now because now it's glued together.
Well, you know, that's typical. A lot of people, it takes us time because we go back and forth. We don't just stay on it constantly. But this is a beautiful house. I love it. I love the idea. But that baby cracks me up every time I see that. It's not just, it's just so cute. Okay.
It was really a fun house to do. There's so many nooks and crannies, and I raised all the floors about a half an inch so I could put wood flooring on it and that kind of thing. And I learned a lot. It really was a good, and I don't know why, but see those two little posts there? They had a hole in the top of them. Well, I thought that's stupid. So that's a button on top of
Those
them.
are buttons?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, when you work with this type of thing, sometimes you have to be innovative or make it do what you want it to do.
Right, creative.
Yeah. And last I knew, the guy that had the company that made the basic house in New England someplace was still in business, and I never spoke to him or anything, but it was well made. It has good wood. It wasn't crummy, whatever, and I think that was important. And so it really, considering I started in 1981, even the paint job has stood up pretty well.
It's a beautiful house. Let's go see another one of your pieces.
Okay.
These room boxes here. Tell about your two displays here.
Okay, the one on the right, I did it with sort of a African wallpaper and this type of thing.
The jungle room.
Yes, and I didn't have the grandfather for a long time, and then I saw him at a show, and so I thought he would be perfect.
He's adorable.
And the children were something like $2.75 a piece, and he was like $275.
$275?
But if you look at the way he's made, I'm not as skilled.
Okay.
I have never done a doll.
That's
in
an
my life.
artisan piece.
Yeah.
Artisan piece.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is, and they did a
Okay.
great job. So he's got a date coming. So the kids, he's telling them where they have to be and what they have to not do.
That is so cute. Okay, so what about this box?
The little box, it just, I had this little box I needed to do something with, and I love the two dolls. They're sort of into mischief together.
Mhm.
I think he's got a canary on his head or something like that.
I didn't notice that.
And so it's a very simple box, but it was fun to do.
Oh, wow. These are beautiful pieces. Okay.
Okay.
Tell us about how the idea of the shop came about.
We knew right from the beginning that we wanted to shop, and it has evolved beautifully. I mean, it had been the kitchen because this was an office building.
Really?
Originally, it was a home, and there was nothing fancy. If you see the basement, it's very, very crude.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was built in sort of the early 1900s. And so we looked all over for where we were going to put this museum.
Mhm.
And Carmel was very rural at that time. So the shop was like a little kitchenette for the office people that worked here.
Mhm.
And they had completely transfigured the layout of this building, for offices, that type of thing. So here we ended up with this little, what was sort of a kitchenette type thing. And we wanted a shop, and so we started it. And it has been redone in the last, even I'd say 5 years,
Mhm.
a lot. Now, and they took the doors off the
The
cover
cabinet
covers,
doors,
which
yeah.
was smart. And, now it's really completely 100% a shop.
That was a good idea.
And evidently the sales do pretty well.
I know you got a lot of money from me. Every time I come here, I can't even volunteer without buying something.
Well, we're very fortunate because anymore, I'm thinking 90% of what's in here was donated to us. And
Wow.
boy, I'll tell you, and when you don't have a professional buyer buying, and miniatures, you never know which direction they're going to go.
Mhm.
So this way, we didn't pay anything, and we still can get a pretty decent price for things. And of course, miniatures, like everything else, have gone up. But they're in impeccable condition. What happened was, a lot of women, particularly wealthy women, started collecting miniatures in like the 1970s.
Mhm.
Well, now they're mostly dead, and their kids never want it. And so,
Oh.
they come. We've literally had people come with a trailer that they had so much stuff.
Wow.
And just dumped it. And so, one of them came like 2 states away, because there aren't that many museums.
Right.
So it's been an interesting procedure. And I never had a lot to do with the shop. Except I bought stuff occasionally.
It sounds like me. Okay, tell us about the shop.
So we want to make sure that the shop has a combination of things that are for miniaturists who are coming here as a miniaturist shop. We are one of the only in-person miniaturist shops left even in the Midwest.
Wow.
And we want to make sure that also as a museum shop, we have things for people who are coming here exclusively to have a day off, to come as a museum visitor, having no idea what they're in for coming into this museum. And having something like these little astrological sign plates is a great kind of souvenir where you can see what a miniature detail can be and take it home with you for something that's both a little personal and something that you can display without having to dive entirely into
And it's
miniatures.
affordable. It's only $5 each.
It's affordable.
I got every one of those. What else do we have?
Well, we also have been doing lots of displays. These are a really nice way to make sure that people understand how they can use their miniatures in a scene and to spark some of the imagination for their own creations as well. This is also just a nice way to display what it is we actually have and to give thematics the same way that a Home Depot might have a garden section or a tool section or an electrical section. This is that kind of theming. But we get to be a little bit more IKEA and a little less Home Depot. We get to actually set up the places. And these displays are, by and large, the work of Kathy Burke, who has done such an incredible job. in the shop
I
here.
love Kathy.
I couldn't be, I'm not surprised. I sort of figured when I first came in here and the whole thing had been transformed. And, you know, it had gotten, the whole place had gotten a little stale. You know, the third co-founder died after about 4 years. And each one of us came at everything with a totally different thing. I mean, I was in here putting displays together. Susie was taking care of a lot of paperwork and, you know, trying, you know, get some money and one thing another. And her husband did some work. What's sort of unique.
These are so, and so some of these things are high end, but then there's still some things in here that is affordable.
Yeah, we
Right,
want to make sure, from a collector's management standpoint, you know, my first priority is making sure that the museum has a proper conservation of a wide variety of things as we can. But in part because miniatures are sort of in some ways, a more mass-produced art form than perhaps other things. We do have some museum-quality pieces in here. Particularly in here, we have this helpfully labeled museum-quality pieces, which are the kinds of things that we would display in the museum, but in some cases are actually duplicates of what we already have.
Wow.
And so these are the kinds of things that, you know, personally, I think are absolute steals, being less than, you know, hundreds of dollars, but are part of the mission statement of being able not to just preserve the history within these walls, but to continue the art form and the craft of it outside of the museum as well. And this is what encourages people to, first of all, see that this is something that they can put in their own boxes, so hopefully they later donate it to us, or just to be inspired of what could be made by a person. Because it's sometimes a little bit different seeing something in a museum, the artist as some nebulous other, even though she's standing right here, versus seeing it in a shop where you get to see, oh, I understand a lot more that a person made this, and that person could be just like me.
Right. See, that's what I said in my first artisans video, that every artisan is not known.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Oh,
many.
And a lot of, along the way, so many of them, either they sign something that 30 years later you have no idea who it is, and or they didn't sign it at all.
There's a lot of folks who don't sign their artworks, and so, you know, for example, this is likely some kind of artisan goose, and it's very lucky that somebody signed Canada Goose, but they don't have their name on it. Very clearly it's just the date and the piece title. And so even picking up literally a random first thing that I find, there's so many things that folks don't think to sign their names on because this is so often considered a craft rather than an art form. And, you know, if you find a painting in a museum that doesn't have a signature on it, it's likely to have it at the very least on the back, but it's likely to have a signature because it's expected for artists to sign their work. But even with artisan pieces in miniature, because it's been viewed as a hobby, a craft, not as an art form for so long, there's so many people who make absolutely stunning work
So
don't
true.
sign it.
Oh, that is so true.
And particularly, you know, 20 and 30 years later, virtually nobody remembers them.
Yeah.
You know, they probably died.
Yeah, so they might get their style through word of mouth in shows like Bishop that we were talking
Right.
about earlier, but then later, when people aren't as sort of into their word of mouth, their network has dispersed more. If it comes to somebody like me who isn't 30 years old, then, you know, I have much less way of actually finding out who did it. And honestly, that's the biggest hurdle in my job, is figuring out who made something.
Okay, let's look over here and see what we got. Oh, so we have different scales over here.
Yeah, so here we have a couple of different scales. Most miniaturists, and especially most miniaturists who donate to us, work in 1-inch scale. So that is 1/12. So 1 foot in real world equals 1 inch in miniature world. These middle sections, though, are 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch. So 1/2 inch is half of 1 inch, 1/4 inch is a fourth of 1 inch scale. So that would be 1/24 and 1/48.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah, well, even as a miniaturist, even 20-something years later, I still get confused about the scales. Look.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Everybody does think. First of all, the small scale for people that are space don't have much space, they can do that. I have never cared for working with small inch, probably because I'm too clumsy. But it doesn't to me give me the thrill that a 1 inch room does.
Yeah. And whereas me, I love how tiny it is.
It's fun.
I'm astounded by the way that 1 inch can capture the real functions. But there's something about ½ inch that for me just feels so much like softer. And feels, in that sense, it's less trying to capture exact reality and more trying to capture the broad strokes of it. And especially when you get little paintings like the rose details on this little countertop.
Well, let me see if I can get in there. Wait a minute.
This one right here.
I think this picture for $12 is so great.
Yeah. No, everything in here is priced, I would say, too low.
I mean that's beautiful, and it's not an actual painting, but it sure looks. They did
Yes.
a great job. I mean, that's a winner.
The thing about this shop that I like is the pricing. I mean, some things are high end, but you have people that come in here that don't have the budget, but they're able to get high end prices at a reasonable price.
Yeah.
And otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get it.
Yeah, even the high-end things are priced lower than what I would say their retail value is.
I agree.
Because part of the mission statement is about making sure that this kind of art form is accessible and that folks are able to continue doing this and continue doing it to a high standard. We don't want to, relegate people to just working with sort of DIY kits and plastic furniture. If we want to be able to continue the art form and continue people making things that then maybe later on they can donate to us and we can display here as the art that it is, we want people to have access to those higher end pieces.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for the tour of the shop.
My pleasure.